Hello and welcome to the presentation on why America should stop this war. In this presentation, we examine one of the most critical foreign policy questions facing the US. Should we pursue military action against Iran or choose diplomacy? This presentation provides some analysis on reasons why the US should avoid the war with Iran. We examine this through multiple lenses: security and strategic concerns, economic consequences, humanitarian and moral considerations, and diplomatic and political factors. Beyond listing reasons, we explore the timeline of the impacts, what happens in the short term, medium term, and long term when we choose peace versus war. We shall be analyzing the economic dimensions, spiritual and moral dimensions, and logical strategic dimensions. This analysis is based on the current expert assessments, polling data, geopolitical analysis as of today, which is March 2026. Our goal is to provide a complete picture of why diplomacy isn't the moral choice, it's the strategic, economic, and practical choice for America's future. Let's set the stage. As we stand in March 2026, tensions between the United States and Iran have reached a critical boiling point. Active debates are happening right now within the White House and the Pentagon regarding potential military action. These aren't abstract discussions, they are real conversations with real consequences. However, the rhetoric sometimes dominates headlines. The expert consensus is quite clear. De-escalation is the preferred path. Intelligence analysts, military strategists, economic advisors, and diplomatic experts have all weighed in, and the majority recommend pursuing diplomatic solutions. Importantly, diplomatic channels have not been closed. Despite tensions, both Washington and Tehran have signaled willingness to negotiate on key issues including nuclear limits, missile programs, and regional security arrangements. What's at stake isn't just bilateral relations, it's the stability of an entire region that's already fragile. The Middle East deals with multiple conflicts, economic challenges, and political transitions. Adding another war could be the spark that ignites a much broader conflagration. Let's begin with the strategic and security concerns. The first and perhaps most fundamental issue is the lack of justification for military action. According to expert analysis, recent incidents have been characterized as unprovoked and with no imminent threat present. This is crucial because it undermines both the legal and moral basis for going to war. Under international law and the United Nations Charter, nations have the right to self-defense against imminent threats. But when experts analyze the situation and find no such imminent threats exist, the legal foundation for military action crumbles. Furthermore, we have seen administration explanations for potential military action shift repeatedly. One day it's about nuclear threats, the next it's about regime change, then it's about imminent danger. This shifting narrative damages the American credibility both domestically and internationally. When justifications keep changing, it suggests either that the decision makers aren't clear about their objectives, or worse, that they're trying to find whatever justification will stick to support a predetermined decision. This leads to another critical problem. Without clear, consistent objectives, how do we measure success? What are the success metrics? When you can't define what victory looks like, how can you achieve it? This is similar to the SMART objectives in a project or in project management. It seems to be there are no SMART objectives. The second major strategic concern involves asymmetrical warfare and regional escalation. Iran cannot match the US in conventional military power, but that doesn't mean they are powerless. What they can do is engage in asymmetrical warfare, attacks that don't involve traditional battlefield confrontations but instead target vulnerabilities. This includes cyber attacks on American infrastructure, missile strikes on US bases in the region, attacks on shipping, and activation of proxy forces. Speaking of proxies, Iran has spent decades building a network of allied militias and political movements across the Middle East. We are talking about groups in Iraq, Lebanon, Yemen, and Syria. If the US strikes Iran directly, Tehran could activate all of these networks simultaneously. Imagine the US military suddenly facing coordinated attacks across 4 or 5 different countries. That's not a war, it's a quagmire. Then there is the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow waterway between Iran and Oman is one of the world's most critical economic choke points. Approximately 20% of the global oil consumption passes through this strait. Iran has repeatedly threatened to close it if attacked. Even though it is not closing it, the insurance or the lack of insurance is causing it to be effectively closed. They have the capability to mine the strait, launch anti-ship missiles, and use fast attack boats to disrupt traffic. Even a temporary closure would send oil prices skyrocketing and trigger a global economic crisis. The third set of strategic concerns involves what happens after the bombs stop falling. History has taught us painful lessons about this, particularly from Iraq and Afghanistan. When you topple a regime, you don't automatically get stability, democracy, or a pro-American government. What you often get is chaos, fragmentation, and power struggles. Iran is a country of over 85 million people with complex ethnic, religious, and political divisions. If military action causes a regime collapse, who will fill the vacuum? Will it be democratic reformers, or will it be even more radical elements? Could the country fragment along ethnic lines like Kurds, Azeris, Arabs, and Persians, each seeking their own autonomy or control? Could it descend into a Syria-like civil war that lasts years? These are real possibilities, and while the US is bogged down in Iran, what happens elsewhere? Russia and China are watching closely. Both nations have been eager to expand their influence in the Middle East. A prolonged US conflict with Iran would be a gift to Moscow and Beijing. They continue to strengthen their ties with the remaining regional powers, expand economic relationships, and portray the United States as a reckless aggressor. Meanwhile, US military capabilities are stretched thin. In the long run, the US ends up with fewer resources to address challenges in the Indo-Pacific, where China's rise presents the most significant long-term strategic challenge to American power in the first place. The fourth strategic point is perhaps the most sobering. History tells us this approach doesn't work. The United States and Iran have been in a state of hostility since 1979. When the Iranian Revolution overthrew the US-backed Shah and American diplomats were taken hostage. For over 4 decades, the US has tried various forms of pressure against Iran: economic sanctions, diplomatic isolation, covert operations, support for opposition groups, and military threats. Has any of this produced lasting policy changes? No. The evidence suggests no. Iran's nuclear program has advanced despite sanctions. Iran's regional influence has grown, not shrunk. Iran's government remains in power. This doesn't mean that Iran's policies are unacceptable. It means that military pressure alone hasn't worked, and there is little reason to believe it would work now. But here's a crucial point. Diplomatic alternatives do exist. Unlike situations where a hostile regime refuses to engage, both the United States and Iran have signaled willingness to negotiate. Channels remain open. There are issues both sides want to discuss, like nuclear limits, missile programs, regional security arrangements, sanctions relief. The 2015 Iran nuclear deal, which the US withdrew from in 2018, showed that diplomacy can produce results. Iran verifiably reduced its nuclear stockpile, dismantled the centrifuges, and accepted intrusive inspections in exchange for sanctions relief. That agreement wasn't perfect according to the US standards, but it worked. It could be a starting point for new negotiations. Now let's turn to economic consequences, which would be immediate and severe. The most direct impact would be on oil prices. Iran is a major oil exporter, and the war would likely remove approximately 20 million barrels per day from the global markets. Not just Iranian production, but also disruption to other producers in the region. Basic economics tells us what happens when supply drops dramatically while demand remains constant. Price. You can expect maybe even up to over $200 per barrel. Analysts project oil could exceed $100 per barrel, and some scenarios suggest even higher prices. Why does this matter to average Americans? Because oil prices affect everything. Gas or gasoline prices would surge, potentially exceeding $5 or $6 per gallon in many markets. This hits working families directly, especially those who need to commute to work or live in areas with poor public transportation. But it goes far beyond the gas pump. Oil is a critical input for countless industries. Plastics, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, fertilizers all depend on petroleum. Transportation costs for every good shipped by truck, ship, or plane would rise. These costs get passed on to the consumers. Your groceries, your clothes, your electronics, everything would become more expensive. This is inflation. It would accelerate rapidly. The Federal Reserve and central banks in most countries would face a terrible dilemma: raise interest rates to fight inflation, which would slow economic growth and potentially trigger a recession, or allow inflation to run hot, which erodes purchasing power and hurts those with fixed incomes. The economic impacts extend far beyond oil prices. Global supply chains, still recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic, would face new severe disruptions. The Middle East is central to global trade routes. The Suez Canal, the Strait of Hormuz, shipping lanes in the Persian Gulf, and the Red Sea, these are arteries of global economy. The war would make these routes dangerous and impassable. Ships would need to take longer routes around Africa, adding weeks to delivery times and massive costs. Shipping insurance would become prohibitively expensive or unavailable for vessels transiting the conflict zones. These costs, like oil prices increases, get passed through the entire supply chain. The products on store shelves would become more expensive and less available. We could see shortages of critical goods, from electronics to medicines to automotive parts. Then there's the direct cost of the war itself. Modern military campaigns are staggeringly expensive. The Iraq War ultimately cost over $2 trillion. Afghanistan exceeded $2 trillion. A conflict with Iran could easily reach hundreds of billions, possibly trillions of dollars. Where does this money come from? It's borrowed, adding to the national debt, which already exceeds $34 trillion. Every dollar spent on bombs and bullets is a dollar not spent on the American priorities, like infrastructure, education, healthcare, research, climate change mitigation. This is the opportunity cost of war. Beyond strategy and economics, we must confront the human cost of war. This isn't about abstract numbers, it's about real people, real families, real lives. Recent escalations have already killed over 1,000 civilians. Among them were students at a girls' school. These aren't combatants. These are children, parents, grandparents, teachers, doctors, workers, people going about their daily lives. A full-scale war would multiply these casualties exponentially. Modern warfare, even with precision weapons, inevitably kills civilians. Buildings collapse, hospitals are damaged, water and electricity systems fail, diseases spread. The Iranian population is over 85 million people. Even a limited conflict would affect millions. And when cities become battlefields, people flee. We could see millions of Iranian refugees attempting to escape the violence. Where would they go? Neighboring countries like Turkey, Iraq, Pakistan, and Afghanistan already hosting millions of refugees from Syria, Afghanistan, and other conflicts. Their systems are stretched to the breaking point. A new refugee crisis of this magnitude would overwhelm regional capacity and create humanitarian emergencies across multiple countries. Refugees would attempt dangerous journeys to Europe, creating political crises there as well. The humanitarian infrastructure, the UN agencies, NGOs, aid organizations simply cannot handle this kind of scale of need. There is another humanitarian consideration that's often overlooked: the impact on Iranian civil society and the prospects of internal change. Many Americans who favor confronting Iran say they want to support the Iranian people against their government. But history shows that foreign military intervention often has the opposite effect. When bombs fall, people tend to rally around their government, even if they oppose it. Hardliners use foreign attacks to justify repression, claiming that dissent is treason or foreign-backed. They crack down on civil society, arrest activists, and silence critics in the name of national unity against an external enemy. This actually reduces the space for internal reform and democratic change. The very people that the US wants to help, like reformers or activists or rights advocates, labor organizers, find themselves targeted as potential fifth columnists. There are also profound ethical questions. Military ethics, international humanitarian law, and basic moral principles all emphasize the protection of non-combatants. Yet modern warfare inevitably causes civilian casualties. How do we justify killing innocent people even as collateral damage? How do we explain to a child who lost their parents that their deaths were necessary for American security? These aren't easy questions, and they weigh on the national conscience. The trauma of war doesn't end when the fighting stops. The soldiers return with PTSD, families mourn lost loved ones, communities are destroyed. This trauma affects generations. Reminder, Nam and Korea. Let's examine the domestic political reality. Any sustainable foreign policy must have public support, and on this issue, the American people have spoken. Polling shows that 56% of Americans oppose US military action in Iran. This isn't a narrow margin, it's a clear majority. Even more significantly, there's bipartisan concern about the trajectory towards war. This isn't just Democrats versus Republicans. There are Republicans who worry about endless wars and the cost in blood and treasure. There are Democrats who support a strong defense but question the wisdom of another Middle East conflict. When a majority of the public opposes military action, and when that opposition crosses party lines, political leaders ignore this at their own peril. Beyond public opinion, there are serious constitutional questions. The US Constitution gives Congress, not the President, the power to declare war. The War Powers Resolution of 1973 requires the President to notify Congress within 48 hours of military action and forbids armed forces from remaining for more than 60 days without congressional authorization. Critics argue that recent executive actions have bypassed these requirements, raising fundamental questions about the separation of powers and constitutional governance. This isn't just legal technicalities, it's about democratic accountability. The international political landscape also strongly favors diplomacy. The European allies, who are crucial partners in any action against Iran, have explicitly called for diplomatic solutions over military action. The EU foreign policy chief has been clear on this position. Why does this matter? Because without European cooperation, sanctions are less effective, intelligence sharing is reduced, and diplomatic pressure is weakened. Europe has significant economic ties to the Middle East and would be severely impacted by a war. They understand this intimately. If the US acts unilaterally without allied support, they bear all the costs while their partners distance themselves. This isolates America and reduces their global influence. Even more significantly, the Gulf Cooperation Council nations, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, and Oman, have urged Washington to avoid escalation. This is crucial because these are the countries that would be in the crosshairs of the Iranian retaliation. They have US military bases on their soil, their oil facilities could be targeted, their cities could face missile attacks, their aero plants are being destroyed. They fear being drawn into a conflict they don't want. When the very nations the US claims to be protecting are begging the US not to act, US needs to listen. They know their region better than we do. They understand the dynamics, the risks, the potential consequences. If they are urging restraint, it's not because they love the Iranian government, it's because they understand that war would be catastrophic for their people and their economies. Now let's look at the timeline of impacts, starting with the economic dimension in the short term. If we choose peace and diplomacy, here's what we gain in the first year: market stability. Global oil markets would remain relatively stable, avoiding the shock that war would bring. Stock markets wouldn't crash on war fears. The US Treasury would retain hundreds of billions of dollars that would otherwise be spent on military operations. This money can be used for immediate domestic needs like pandemic response, infrastructure repairs, education funding, or debt reduction. We maintain the capital flexibility. Now what do we avoid? The immediate price shock. The war would likely send gasoline prices above $5 per gallon almost overnight. This would hit the American families already struggling with inflation. We'd also avoid panic selling in financial markets. Retirement accounts, 401ks, college saving funds, these would remain stable rather than plunging in value. The psychological impact of market stability can't be overstated. When people see their retirement savings evaporating, they stop spending, which slows the economy. By choosing diplomacy, we maintain economic confidence and stability. This isn't just about avoiding negative outcomes, it's about preserving the economic security of millions of American families who live paycheck to paycheck and can't absorb sudden price increases. Looking at the medium-term economic picture, 1 to 5 years out, the benefits of peace compound. Instead of spending hundreds of billions on war, we can invest that capital in productive domestic priorities. Imagine what we could do: rebuild crumbling infrastructure, bridges, roads, water systems, electrical grids, and also give some extra electricity to the AI that they're trying to build, accelerate the transition to green energy, creating millions of jobs in solar, wind, and battery technology, invest in education and workforce development, fund medical research. These investments generate economic returns. They create jobs, boost productivity, and increase competitiveness. Meanwhile, securing shipping routes through the Persian Gulf, maintain global supply chains. Goods flow smoothly, businesses can plan with confidence. Consumers have access to products at stable prices. Now, what do we avoid? Massive deficit spending, while costs are borrowed, adding to the national debt. Every $1 billion borrowed is $1 billion we'll pay interest on for decades. We'd also avoid supply chain crises. War in the Middle East would disrupt shipping, causing shortages of everything from semiconductors to pharmaceuticals to automotive parts. These shortages would ripple through the economy, causing production delays, layoffs, and higher prices. The medium-term choice is clear. Invest in America's future or spend on destruction. Build or break, create jobs or destroy them. Make America great again or shove it into the ground. In the long term, 5 years and beyond, the economic advantages of avoiding war become even more pronounced. Fiscal health improves. With lower debt and debt service costs, the U.S. maintains a stronger credit rating. This means lower interest rates for everyone: mortgages, car loans, business loans, student loans. The entire economy benefits from cheaper credit. We can continue pursuing energy independence through sustainable means rather than military means. Instead of spending blood and treasure securing oil fields, we invest in renewable energy, electric vehicles, solar power, and energy efficiency. This makes America more competitive in the industries of the future. Now, what do we avoid? The lost generation of economic potential. After Iraq and Afghanistan, we saw a generation of veterans struggling with unemployment, PTSD, and reintegration. We saw trillions of dollars that could have been invested domestically instead of spent on occupation and reconstruction. We avoid that mistake. We also avoid the reconstruction burden. If the US topples the Iranian government, who rebuilds Iran? History suggests it would be the United States. We'd be responsible for rebuilding infrastructure, establishing governance, providing security, and delivering basic services. This could cost trillions and last decades. By choosing diplomacy, we avoid this open-ended commitment. Long-term economic strength comes from investing in our own people, our infrastructure, our innovation, and our competitiveness. Now let's examine the spiritual and moral timeline, beginning with the short term. In the immediate months, choosing peace means preserving life. Every bomb not dropped, every missile not fired, every soldier not deployed means life saved. We're talking about Iranian civilians, Middle Eastern civilians, yes, but also American service members. We're talking about young men and women who would come home in body bags or with life-altering injuries. We're talking about parents, spouses, and children who would receive their devastating knock on the door. By choosing diplomacy, we prevent this trauma. We demonstrate compassion to the world. We show that the Americans value human life over military dominance. This matters for our soul as a nation. What do we avoid? The immediate trauma of war. Soldiers witnessing horrific violence, families receiving death notifications, communities losing their young people, civilians watching their homes, hospitals, and schools destroyed. We avoid the moral injury that comes from killing, even in war. We avoid the collateral damage, the innocent people killed, not because they were targets, but because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Every civilian death is a moral failure, even if militarily justified. By choosing peace, we demonstrate our commitment to human rights in action, not just rhetoric. We align our actions with our values. In the medium term, 1 to 5 years, the moral benefits of peace continue to accumulate. The nation heals. We avoid the deep divisions that prolonged war creates. Think about the Vietnam War, Iraq, Afghanistan. These conflicts tore America apart, creating generational divisions, eroding trust in institutions, and leaving scars that haven't fully healed. By choosing diplomacy, we avoid repeating this trauma. We restore America's moral capability in the world. When we act with restraint, when we pursue peaceful solutions, when we respect international law and human life, other nations look to us as a leader. And when you mess up, they don't. They trust our word, they cooperate with us, They see us as a force for good. This moral responsibility is a form of power, soft power, that is just as important as military might. What do we avoid? The radicalization that war fuels. Every civilian killed, every home destroyed, every family displaced creates anger and resentment. Extremist groups use this to recruit. They point to American bombs and say, this is what they think of you. This is why you must fight. War creates the very terrorism it claims to prevent. We also avoid deepening public cynicism. When wars are fought on false pretenses, when costs are hidden, when victories are elusive, people lose faith in their government. They become cynical about all official statements, all policy decisions. This erosion of trust is corrosive to democracy. In the long term, 5 years and beyond, the spiritual and moral choice for peace shapes our legacy. We establish a precedent that America resolves conflicts through dialogue, not destruction. We show future generations that strength isn't measured in bombs dropped, but in lives saved, in problems solved, in bridges built. This becomes part of the national story, our identity. We align our actions with our global conscience, with the universal values of peace, human dignity, and coexistence that we claim to champion. What do we avoid? The historical stigma of aggression. How will history judge a war with Iran? Will it be given as necessary self-defense or reckless aggression? Given the lack of imminent threat, the absence of UN authorization, the opposition of allies, and the availability of diplomatic alternatives, history is likely to judge such a war harshly. They will be remembered not as defenders but as aggressors. This stigma lasts for generations. We also avoid the spiritual debt, the collective moral burden that a nation carries when it causes unnecessary destruction. This debt weighs on the national soul. It manifests in guilt, in division, in loss of moral confidence. Veterans carry it, policymakers carry it, the nation carries it. By choosing peace, we align our values with our actions. We demonstrate that we truly believe in the sanctity of life, in the rule of law, and in the possibility of peaceful resolution. Now let's examine the logical and strategic timeline, starting with the short term. In the immediate months, choosing diplomacy maintains alliance cohesion. NATO remains united, regional partners stay engaged, we present a united front to adversaries. This unity is a source of strength. When we act unilaterally, allies distance themselves and we lose this advantage. We maintain a strong deterrence posture without promoting asymmetric retaliation. Our military remains strong, our base is secure, our interests protected. But we don't cross the line that would trigger Iranian retaliation. What would we avoid? The quagmire. Once you commit troops to combat, it's incredibly difficult to extract them. Political pressure mounts to support the troops by escalating, not withdrawing. We'd be bogged down immediately with no clear exit strategy. We also avoid immediate retaliation. Iran has multiple ways to strike back. Cyber attacks on American infrastructure, power grids, financial systems, hospitals, missile strikes on US bases in Iraq, Syria, Bahrain, Qatar, attacks on shipping in the Persian Gulf, activation of proxy forces to attack American interests across the region. These aren't hypothetical threats, they are capabilities Iran has demonstrated. By choosing diplomacy, we preserve our defensive strength without triggering these attacks. In the medium term, 1 to 5 years, the strategic advantages of peace become clear. We maintain strategic focus on high priority threats. Instead of occupying Iran, you can focus on cyber warfare capabilities, nuclear non-proliferation, great power competition with China and Russia, and emerging technologies. These are the challenges that will define American security in the 21st century. A war with Iran would distract from all of these. We preserve diplomatic leverage, sanctions, negotiations, international pressure. These tools remain available when we are not at a war. Once you bomb someone, it's hard to negotiate with them. War burns bridges. Diplomacy keeps them intact. What do we avoid? The power vacuum. If we topple the Iranian government, what fills the void? Will it be democracy or chaos? Or a worse regime? We'd be responsible for what comes next, and we'd likely face an insurgency. Iran is 3 times larger than Iraq, with more than double the population, more complex ethnic and religious divisions, and stronger nationalist traditions. An insurgency there would make Iraq look easy. We'd face years of guerrilla warfare, suicide bombings, IEDs, and sectarian violence. This is costly in blood, treasure, and morale. By choosing diplomacy, we avoid this quagmire. In the long term, 5 years and beyond, the strategic choice for peace shapes American power for decades. We build a sustainable regional security architecture based on agreements, not force. This is more stable, more legitimate, and more durable. Military occupation is temporary. Diplomatic agreements can last generations. We optimize the military budget for future technologies, AI, hypersonics, quantum computing, space capabilities, rather than maintaining occupation forces in the Middle East. This keeps America at a higher cutting edge of military innovation. What do we avoid? The blowback. Foreign intervention creates resentment. Resentment fuels terrorism. We have seen this play out repeatedly. The 9/11 mess up didn't come from nowhere. They were rooted in resentment of US military presence in the Middle East. A war with Iran would create a new generation of enemies. We'd be fighting the consequences for decades. We also avoid strategic overstretch. The United States faces a rising China in the Indo-Pacific, Russia in Europe, nuclear proliferation in North Korea, climate change, pandemics, and cyber threats. Our resources, military, economic, diplomatic, are finite. If we are bogged down in Iran, we can't effectively address these other challenges. China would expand its influence, Russia would test NATO, our defense capabilities would weaken in critical regions. By choosing diplomacy with Iran, we preserve our strength for the challenges that truly threaten the American security and prosperity in the 21st century. Let's bring all of this together with a summary of the core arguments. Economically, war is a net negative investment. It destroys capital rather than creating it. It diverts resources from productive uses to destructive ones. Peace, by contrast, allows capital to compound domestically. Every dollar not spent on war can be invested in infrastructure, education, research, healthcare, investments that generate returns. The economic choice is clear. Spiritually and morally, war degrades the human spirit. It normalizes violence, desensitizes us to suffering, and burdens the national conscience with unnecessary death and destruction. Peace preserves moral integrity and sanctity of life. It aligns our actions with our values. It demonstrates that we are willing to solve problems through dialogue rather than destruction. The moral choice is clear. Logically and strategically, war introduces unmanageable variables. You can't control how an enemy will retaliate. You can't predict what will happen after the regime collapses. You can't know how long an insurgency will last or how much it will cost. Diplomacy, by contrast, offers a controlled, sustainable path to security. You can adjust negotiations, you can modify agreements, you can respond to changing circumstances. The strategic choice is clear. When you combine these three dimensions, economic, spiritual, and logical, the case for peace becomes overwhelming. This isn't a choice. The evidence, the analysis, the expert consensus all point in one direction: diplomacy over war. I want to highlight the expert consensus on this issue because this isn't just my analysis or one person's opinion. This is the overwhelming view of specialists who study the region, who understand the dynamics, who have analyzed the risks and opportunities. Dr. Olivia captured it perfectly when she said, we don't need another war in this region. We already have a lot. We should really be using this time to find a diplomatic solution. Think about the statement, we don't need another war. Not that we can't afford another war or another war would be difficult, but we don't need one. It's not necessary. It's not required. It's not the only option. We already have a lot. The Middle East is already dealing with multiple conflicts: Syria, Yemen, Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The region is saturated with violence, instability, and humanitarian crises. Adding another war doesn't solve these problems, it multiplies them. We should really be using this time to find a diplomatic solution. This is the key point. Diplomacy isn't the fallback option when the war fails. It's the preferred option. It's the smart option. It's the option that preserves American interests, protects American lives, preserves American resources, and maintains the American moral situation. This isn't just one person's view. It's a consensus of regional experts, military strategists, intelligence analysts, economists, and diplomatic professionals. When the experts are unified, we should listen. We stand at a crossroads. Two paths diverge before us. The first path is war. It promises quick resolution but delivers a prolonged conflict. It promises security but creates new threats. It promises victory but delivers a quagmire. It costs blood, American lives, Iranian lives, civilian lives, a lot of other countries' lives too. It costs treasure, hundreds of billions, possibly trillions of dollars. It destroys the moral authority. It destroys the alliances. It destroys the focus on real threats. The second path is peace. It requires patience, diplomacy, and compromise. It's harder politically in the short term because it doesn't look tough. But it's smarter strategically. It preserves American lives. It protects American resources. It maintains American alliances. It allows the US to focus on challenges that truly threaten its future, like other powers rising, climate change, pandemics, cyber threats, economic competition. The evidence is overwhelmingly clear. Every dimension we have examined, strategic, economic, humanitarian, political, moral, points to the same conclusion: diplomacy over war. This isn't about being soft or weak. It's about being smart and strong. It's about having the courage to choose the harder path of diplomacy over the easier path of destruction. America's future is at stake. The choice is clear. The question is, do we have the wisdom to make it, or the guts to swallow it? This presentation is based on rigorous analysis from multiple sources. These sources represent a diversity of viewpoints, American, European, and regional. They include academic research, journalistic investigation, and policy analysis. They converge on the same conclusion: diplomacy is the prudent path forward. I encourage you to explore these sources yourself, to dig deeper into the analysis, to understand the complexities of this issue. An informed global citizen is essential to global governance, especially on matters of war and peace. The decision about Iran is just for policymakers. It's for all of us living on this pale blue dot the size of a pixel when viewed from really far away, because we are the ones who live with the consequences. Thank you for your attention. I hope you find this presentation beneficial and useful, and I hope you can use your influence to make better decisions on this matter.